All right, everyone, let's get rolling. Thank you so much. I'm excited to have you all here. Greatly appreciate it. Whenever we closed out the session last week, we talked about how this triggers, and it only triggers in a fully established connection. That's it. That's the only scenario. So if we were to come back and try to do spoofing and all of that, it really wouldn't work all that well at all, because that will only trigger whenever somebody establishes that full connection on it as well. So when we do that full connection with a lowercase s, capital T at that particular point, that's whenever we get it to fire properly, and really kind of shuts down any of the issues that we would have with DDoSing ourselves as well. So I'm gonna just give me a second. I'm gonna try to text Richard too. Richard Cloud Labs. Let me fix that spelling. There we go. There we go. All good. All right. So I've texted him, I've emailed him, and whenever it comes to tech support, that means they're going to jump right on it. Lickety, splickety, hippity hop. All right. So it adds that rule to the firewall on a Linux system. It's beautiful, but the question becomes, for a lot of people, can you do the same thing on Windows? The answer to that question is yes, you can actually do the same thing on Windows. It just doesn't make any sense because we're going to be using batch scripting to do it from the command line because we hate ourselves. Let me explain why it sucks so incredibly bad. So if we do a for-f loop, that means for-f means we're going to iterate through the contents of a file. Consider this to be an array of strings, a collection of values that come out, right? So same thing as the backtick on Linux, where we had little backticks. See, the camera's a little bit reversed. Backticks are that way, as far as your camera's concerned. We have the little backticks going, and those backticks basically allows us to encapsulate all of the different the big long string commands. So it just kicks out only the thing that we want to see. We just want to see that one thing come out, which is the IP address. We specified the limbs. Now, right here, let me bring up my little laser pointer because I thought that was pretty cool. I actually dig the laser pointer. It's like pew, 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 pew. So if we look right here in delimiters, what does that mean for delimiters? Does anyone know? In the world of batch scripting, it says delims equals right bracket, left bracket, or left bracket, right bracket. What does that mean for delimiters? Huh? Now, this is weird. We've got left bracket, right bracket, and two spaces. If you have in batch scripting where you've specified delimiters as left bracket, right bracket, and two spaces, it means the delimiters are left bracket, right bracket, colon, and semicolon. Why? I don't know. I have no clue. Not really documented all that well anywhere that I could see, even on Stack Overflow. But as near as I can tell, there are default delimiters that show up within batch scripting that are just basically expected. And that is colon and semicolon are just like, yeah, those are delimiters. They're always a delimiter. So you can identify that with the space. Yeah. That took me a while. The way I actually discovered it and got it finally working is I screwed up and typed two spaces in from a copy and pasting error, and it worked. And I had the two commands right on top of each other, and I was basically doing character by character analysis, and it turns out that's what it took. So we have the tokens equal 4. That means we're expecting 4 separate values. The variable is going to get assigned to the variable of I. And this is a batch script. You know that because it says %% And then we say in, and then we have our backticks there. Netcat listen on port 3333. Don't resolve any names. Be verbose. We have standard error dumped to standard output. Should look really familiar because a lot of that syntax is the same. We're going to pipe that standard output into find, which is like grep, but crappy. And then we're looking for the string from. And then we set the value of the IP address to the variable I. So we take those tokens, count over 4, and I can't remember. It's like received connection from or something like that. And then it has the IP address, but it's the 4th value. After we have that set up, then we're going to go through. We need the verbose, by the way. Great question, Anita. We need the verbose. Otherwise, it will not print out every time it receives a connection. So we need to have that connection. We need to get that message from Netcat. And if we don't have the verbosity, we won't get it. Good question, though. Then we take that variable of the percent IP or IP equals percent I, and then we start netsh adv firewall, add rule name delete, just giving it a name, direction in, the remote IP address is the variable, and the local port is any, local port protocol is TCP action block, and we're done. So yeah, you totally can do this. Is this persistent? The firewall rule is persistent. I named it delete just so I could find my firewall rules and blow them away. Super easy. But that's just what I did with mine. But no, the firewall rule itself will be persistent. However, the actual rule triggering it up here will only continue to fire as long as the script is executing. So every firewall rule it creates, persistent, and it'll only keep running while it's running from the command line. Now, I had mentioned earlier the whole idea of capture the flag exercises and CTFs that are out there. You got a bunch of things like CCDC competitions. And I told you I was going to give you a little bit more backstory about what actually happened with me kind of setting up this class and these different techniques. But a number of years ago, while I was teaching at the SANS Institute, we brought in White Wolf Security and we set up this like capture the flag challenge where we brought in some of the best pen testers in the world. Like we had Atlas of Doom, we had a whole bunch of people from Immunity, we had a whole bunch of SANS instructors, and then they were going up against the blue team, which is a whole bunch of attendees in the conference and some blue team attendee, blue team instructors. And it wasn't even fair because on the offensive side all got some of the best security tools they could get. They were getting Core Impact, they were running Metasploit, they were running Immunity Canvas, they had zero-day exploits, they had all of the different attacker tools that any attacker could ever hope or dream to have. And on the blue team, it was a whole bunch of Windows 2000 servers and Linux kernel 2.4 or 2.7 systems. So it wasn't even remotely close to being on parity with each other. They had no AV, they had no intrusion detection systems, they had no corporate level firewalls at all. So it was literally just like, there's a really, really like kind of, I don't know. I think it's funny, but it's a Monty Python skit where it's a world champion boxer that's boxing a little girl. And they, it's just like it was a lot like this, where the red team was just constantly beating up the blue team again and again and again and again and again. And when I was on the red team, everyone was like high-fiving each other. We're like, we just took their web server, we just took their log system down, we just did this. And everybody on the red team is like popping and shotgunning beers and like champagne spread absolutely everywhere. I mean, it was crazy. They had like infosec people doing lines of coke off each other. It was really disturbing. And myself, Larry Pesci, and Paul Azadorian were seeing all of this, and we were like, this doesn't feel right. Like this feels really bad, actually. Like it doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem like it's it just felt bad. So we all switched over and we started working with the defensive team. And when we started working with the defensive team, the first thing that I did out of the gate is I set up this. Immediately set up this particular script on all of the Linux computer systems. And immediately we started like blocking the red team from gaining access. I think Hal Pomerantz, maybe, I can't remember who turned on the same thing on the Windows firewall, basically started locking down the Windows firewall, started doing things like app locker, started running through all of these things. And literally, we had the entire red team completely shut out in about an hour. Like in the next room, we had no AV. The red team on the other side was just like, we're done. We're completely stuck. We don't know what's going on. And then one of the people that was running the CTF exercise comes in and says, okay, guys, okay, new rule. You guys can't turn on automatically the firewalls on the Windows and the Linux computer systems. You just can't. So we're going to remove that rule and we got to get this game going again. I'm like, I was just starting to have fun. So we shut off all the firewalls. And then, do you remember yesterday whenever I was playing around with Shodan? Let's go to Shodan again. So if we go to Shodan and we do images.shodan.io, and I do port 5900, which is VNC, I set up a fake VNC server on a bunch of the Linux and Windows computer systems where you could connect to it via VNC, but the Java applet that it would serve up to you to connect into the VNC server was backdoored with malware. So we would basically set up all these vulnerable VNC servers. The hackers would see them. They would immediately try to gain access to them. And then we would get access to their computer systems. And it turns out that a lot of the red teamers were pen testing from their work computers, which had reports from other customers on their computers, and they got a wee bit miffed about that. And it was, I should have said this. I forgot to tell this at the beginning of the story. At the beginning of the story, Tim, the guy that was running the whole thing, came in and was like, I want you guys all to know that there are no rules. There's no holds barred. And he's like playing it up for the SANS people that are the attendees that are watching this. And everyone's like, it's like anything goes in this, the cyber range of doom. And then it's like, okay, guys, new rule, no firewalls. And then it's like, okay, another new rule. The blue team cannot counter hack the red team. And it just went like that for the rest of the week, every single night, So when an attacker sees something like this, like they see a VNC portal, and let's say ICS right here. Let me bring up the rest of the ICS portals. Like whenever a hacker sees stuff like this, where they see full SCADA, ICS, supervisory control, data acquisition systems, it just gets them all like super excited, right? Like they absolutely have the ability to start. Let me go ahead and log out and log back in. Just got an email from them saying it should be fine. Nope. Same thing. Let me do a screenshot for them. Always, anytime you're working with tech support, you should always do screenshots. Always. There we go. So yeah, I mean, this is kind of the genesis of where a lot of this stuff actually started. And I think that that's an important point. Whenever you have the ability to kind of throw these fake servers against an attacker, fake VNC systems that look like SCADA systems, the attackers are going to go for it, right? They're absolutely going to go for it. They're going to try to gain access to these systems. And this becomes really important a little bit later where we start talking about setting up different web servers and different things that look like this. And we're setting up a honeypot framework here. Joe's working on it right now, where you can point at these VNC systems and it'll clone these systems as well and make it look like it's an actual HVAC system or whatever some of these systems are that you have here, menu, principal, distribution, and so on, right? So that is cool, right? That makes it really, really effective in a way of trying to mess with attackers. And whenever I saw these techniques working against some of the best hackers on the planet, I started getting excited. I started thinking, hey, we've got something here that is valuable. Now, you can do it from the command line, but you can also do the exact same thing that we were talking about where you can use PowerShell. There's a number of different honeypot PowerShell scripts that are out there that you can run those as well. So what do these buy you? So if we go back to the detection time plus reaction time must be less than the amount of time it takes for an attacker to break into the system, we are starting to see this formula start to shift. And I hope between what we've been doing over the past couple of days that you all are starting to see that that game is starting to shift out as well, right? It's starting to change what it is you can do as a defender. And I hope that you can start seeing how this really starts to change the game whenever you're an attacker trying to break into an environment as well. So we're starting to change that. And also, if we're looking at traditional security technologies, we have a huge blind spot in 0 days. We have a huge blind spot whenever somebody's trying to attack an environment using a protocol that is using an encryption algorithm. We have these blind spots that are kind of legitimate in our environment. Like you can't look at a 0 day and all of a sudden have it like always, be detected. A number of years ago, there was a company, I can't remember, I think it was Fidelis, that came up with the idea of negative day threat protection. Like it's pre-cog, we'll be able to identify attacks before the attackers even have them as well. So yeah, these current technologies fail at detecting attackers over a number of these different protocols. And really, from the flexibility that we give you in honeyports, it gives us that capability where we can detect things that are running in Python. We can detect things that are running in PowerShell. We can detect things that are running in Ruby scripts as well. And it really makes it great in some of those air-gapped networks and classified networks as well. So honeyports in the enterprise, question just came up. At the CTF, why was it we invited the world's best hackers, but we didn't invite the world's best defenders? They did. They did. I want to make that very, very clear. This was a SANS conference. There was a lot of people that are very, very good defenders. But let's go back to kind of the Vladimir Putin thing. If you're going to have security in your environment, what are some tools that you're going to have in your environment? Like, what are some tools you're going to need? Like, if you're going to try to defend your network, what tools do you have to have? Got several people typing. EDR, SIM, right? Sysmon. Got some more things coming. IDS, IPS, SIM. Okay, Black Hills. Thank you. The care package is on the way. All right. So when you're looking at these things, the blue team had no SIM. The blue team had no antivirus. The blue team had no IDS. They had no firewall. They had no IPS. They had none of those traditional things that you would have in an enterprise when you're trying to defend your network, right? So the blue team is always at a disadvantage, but now you take away the tools that they normally have. Talk about D20, that's like rolling a D1 at that particular point, right? So like playing soccer without a goalkeeper and, having a team of a bunch of pirates with peg legs, reached out with its noodly appendage. Yes, it did. The flying spaghetti monster did that day. It did that day well, in fact. So take all of that away, and all of a sudden your best defenders don't know where to begin, right? And really, whenever I tell the story, Paul, Larry, myself, Hal, and a bunch of other people, like we had to sit down and be like, we've got Jack. Oh, Jason Fossen was in on this too. And I was like, what are we going to do? And we started bouncing around ideas. It's like, can we create something that automatically triggers an IP tables rule when someone connects to it? Yes, we can. Go for it. Went off and started doing that on Linux, started getting it on Windows. What can we do? App Locker. Some people mentioned App Locker. That is another thing, software restriction policies back then that we enabled. We basically took the entire system, reverted it back to a clean snapshot, disconnected it first, ran software restriction policies against the entire system, turned it back on, let it run. Hacking team couldn't gain access to that system to save their ass, right? So we had to start thinking about computer security in a fundamentally different way when we started doing these things once we had these different security products that were removed from our environment as well. So honeyports are so simple, right? We can run these absolutely anywhere and everywhere in the environment with little to no impact on production at all. Super easy to do. They're low interaction. You do run into some issues with vulnerability assessment scanning. Some people mentioned that a little bit earlier. So what you would have to do is create your firewall rules, where you have the exception for your vulnerability scanner be first, because firewall rules are processed in order. If you create an allow exception, instead of jump drop, you jump it to allow. At that particular point, you're going to allow your vulnerability scanner in, and you don't have to worry about these honeyports actually triggering in your environment as well. It may be possible, very unlikely an attacker would use these scripts to block legitimate systems. Honestly, it's very low. It's an incredibly low risk. I talk about it because, well, exclusively because I have people that are worried about it. And I want people to be okay, to not be concerned with that as a risk, because it's the exact same risks that exist in TCP sequence number prediction for absolutely everything that's out there today. All right. We're going to skip port spoof for a second because we're still kind of messing with the Cloud Lab environment. I'm checking. For those of you that are in Cloud Labs, how many of you can actually see your applications? I'm trying to sign out and sign back in. He said that he got it fixed. If you guys can give me a heads up, I have no applications, no applications, no applications. Try logging out and logging back in. And if you could do me a favor while we're teaching, if you could kind of watch that and let me know if you see it pop up, and then immediately do a screenshot and share it with us, because it lets us know that they got it working. But what we're going to do is we're going to jump ahead to a different section of the class. That's going to be canary tokens. Here we go. All right. So this is the website, and this is actually a lab, which is great because we don't need to have a VM for this. And it's one of the labs that we're doing today anyway, which is really, really super cool. And it's going to buy us some time. So I want to talk about it. So as we're moving into the sections, right? The other thing that we can do for cyber deception is we can create canary things, canary tokens. And I'm going to go through some of the canary tokens here that I think are absolutely fantastic, and I want you to play with them. I'm going to warn you that the canary token server tends to get a little bit overloaded, so it may take a while for some of the canary token triggers to fire. But everything on this website, which is created by Hiron Mir and Sub-T, Casey Smith, they are all different tokens that if an attacker interacts with them, it automatically triggers an alert. All right. So we can create a web bug. If somebody accesses a website, it'll a certain like web portal, it'll actually trigger it as well. All right. So that's just one. DNS entry, credit card. Check this one out. So I can do create token, and I can put in my email, and I can say credit card like that. And then I can create this token. Now, it literally just gave you a credit card. All right. So how this works, and this is really, really, really super cool, is this particular credit card is very, very similar to Bluebird. I think it's American Express Bluebird, where you can set up the credit card. So anytime anyone tries to access this credit card, it automatically generates an email alert to you. So Canary Tokens has set it up on their website where this particular credit card, if an attacker ever tries to download and use 4367-9701-3952-7124 expiration date CVV number, you will immediately get an alert. So what you would do is you would take this credit card number, if you're processing and holding credit cards, and you would insert that credit card into your database of credit cards and in your PCI zone, and then you will know immediately two separate things. One, you're going to know like that this particular credit card has been breached. That is great notification. And two, sometimes you can actually identify where that particular system came from. So that's one, that's credit cards. Just a straight up QR code, throw it up for the attacker. MySQL database alert if somebody tries to dump your MySQL database. So if you have a MySQL database and I use this canary token, it's going to create this inside of your MySQL database. So what you do is you're going to run this command on your MySQL database. And then if at any time an attacker dumps all of the data from your MySQL database, you're going to get an alert. AWS keys, absolute bomb. In the AWS key, you can do an AWS key. What you do is you put this somewhere up on your GitHub repository, right? If you go back to my GitHub repository right here, we go to Strand.js. I think I have fake co. Oh, I must have removed it. Crap. Did I remove it? I think I did. But I had some AWS keys here as a CTF challenge. But you take this and you just load it up on your GitHub repository. And what's cool about this is AWS actually logs who's trying to access this S3 bucket. So you put this somewhere, and then when the attacker tries to access this S3 bucket, you get into a situation where you're going to get the IP address of who is going to access that S3 bucket. You can create a fake app on your device, like what is the icon that you want to use as well. And you can say, I want to call this signal. So if anybody actually uses this app, it triggers and it fires. What are some other ones? There's some really, really great ones. Where's my favorite? Okay, check this one out. Not my favorite. We're getting close. This one creates a registry key. So if anybody runs an application on your environment or runs an executable, it'll generate an registry key that as soon as that executable is invoked on any of your systems, it'll let you know that somebody is accessing it as well. Here we go. Here we go. Check this out. This one is my fave, and you're going to see this in just a little bit as well. So we can put in a domain, put in my email address, and then I can do like that. And then I can create this canary. Look at this. So what this does is if I have any web page in my environment at all, and I have a user ID and a password in it, what I can do is insert this JavaScript. And if an attacker clones a website, clones my website, they're going to clone this JavaScript. And this JavaScript says, hey, if this window location is not on blackhillsinfosec.com, immediately access this canary token icon, this image, and it'll give you the IP address of the server that is running. So you can literally detect somebody launching a spear phishing attack against you before they send a single spear phishing email into the environment. Yeah, you hard code it right in. So this allows you to detect spear phishes before the spear phish fires. Now, I talk about this all the time in terms of threat intelligence, right? When you're looking at threat intelligence is all about how do we identify what an attacker is doing? And so much threat intelligence today is what are attackers doing against third parties and different organizations, hacked websites, hacked organizations a week ago, a month ago, a year ago. If you're utilizing canary tokens and you're utilizing cyber deception, you're getting threat intelligence against your environment right now. Now, some people will say, well, all the attacker has to do is see the script. Well, all you have to do is obfuscate it. There is no attacker that I can think of that is going to go through and try to reverse engineer that JavaScript. You can also go to third-party websites. Let me do this. You can also go to third-party obfuscation. If you want to see this fire, there's a bunch of JavaScript obfuscators out there where you can obfuscate your code and it'll actually fire your code. There you go. And it should fire it. But like I said, canary tokens tends to get a little bit overloaded whenever we're running it during class. But you guys can see just how unbelievably powerful all of this is. So if you want to canary all the things, you can totally canary all of the things. Like, I recommend that you set these up and you spread them across your entire environment. And the other thing that's really, really super cool about this is you don't just have to run this in the Thinkus Canaries website. You can totally download and run the entire Canary infrastructure for the Canary tokens on your own environment. You can just go through, pull down the documentation, and you can download the entire thing, set up your own domain and everything. So all of it is there. All right. So we're not going to do a lab where you guys are going to play with this. I'm going to say, let's play with this for 40 minutes. That gives us 10 minutes on the break, gives us half an hour to play with Canary tokens and all of those different things. So let's just get rocking and rolling. Let's set 40 minutes on the clock. I'm going to call Richard and we're going to try to see what's going on. Good thing we got some labs that we can work with until then. So everybody, let's get rolling. I'll see you on the other side of 40 minutes. All right, we back. Awesome. Once again, you guys, please do a shout out, do a follow, check out the album by No Bandwidth, Bo Bullock, our instructor here at Anti-Siphon Security Training. Super awesome stuff that he puts out. And he really tries to make it as accessible to as many people as possible. I have some cool stuff to show you about what we're doing with No Bandwidth. And in the area of a comic book, we have an entire comic book coming out called The Future Is. We had a Kickstarter, which is closed, but the comic is still coming out. And I can break you guys off with a little preview of the, God, I got to stop doing R. Kelly references. You know what I should do? I should do PD. Oh, no, I can't. No, I can't do that. I can't, just musicians these days. You can't trust them. It's amazing. You give someone millions, if not billions of dollars, and they become a-holes. It's just weird. It's just strange. But I can show you what that comic book looks like and what you can expect in the very near future. So we got some cool stuff. But a lot of you were playing with Canary tokens, which I thought was super cool. I appreciate you guys sitting kind of bearing with us as we were resetting the Cloud Lab portal. It looks like things are back up and running. Super stoked about that. Big thanks to the team for jumping on that issue. And let's keep going. So we did port spoof, right? Before we switched over to Canary tokens, we talked a little bit about port spoof like port honeyports and things like that. But what if we went deeper? Like, what if we went another layer down? What if it wasn't just an issue of creating a deny list entry as soon as somebody connected to a specific port? Because whenever you do deny listing, there's a problem with this. All right. Now, as soon as I deny list an attacker, what kind of assumptions can that attacker make right out of the gate, right? So I deny list the attacker and we're changing the OODA loop. We're changing D time plus R time must be less than attack time and all of those different things. So what can the attacker assume? Like, once the system has gone dark to them, yeah, there's some level of DTEX that's there, right? Some level of DTEX, right? So when we're looking at this, right, when we're trying to take this down and we're trying to go a little bit deeper into it, we kind of want the attacker to engage with our cyber deception and continue to be engaged with our cyber deception for as long as possible, right? For as long as possible, because the more time they spend engaged with our honeypot technology, the more detection opportunity that we have. Further, the more time they spend interacting with that honeypot, the less time they're actually attacking real assets. So if I immediately deny list an attacker, well, that's fun and that's cool and it's fun to have fun, but you have to know how. Wouldn't it be cooler if we could get them hung up for hours, if not days, in trying to identify where different parts of our environment are and try to get clean views of our environment, really mess with their ability to properly observe on that? Well, turns out we can. This is a tool that we're in the process of rewriting with some of our interns, but the idea of port spoof is it isn't just a tripwire, right? It isn't just a tool that's going to deny list, add someone to a rule, a firewall rule, and then lock them out. We need to go to the point where we're completely screwing over their capability to get any visibility into the environment at all. But we also get into some questions of logging. This is one of the things I really feel like I don't do as good of a job as I should in this class. And I could probably update some of the labs in the class to incorporate more logging capability that's out there. So if you look at the honeyport.sh script, so if I go vi honeyport.sh, one of the problems with this is there's no logging in this particular rule that I have established. So what I can do with this particular command is it's very easy to add in a log. I can do this, copy that, and then I can paste it in there. Let's go right click, copy, and then right click, paste. There we go. And instead of dropping it to log, I can do, or sorry, jumping it to drop. I can jump it to log, and you can do -- log - prefix. And then you can put some type of firewall hit like that. And then it'll log prefix so I can create some type of filtering on that. So this particular rule absolutely can incorporate some level of logging anytime that someone nails this particular rule. So we can do that. We can also do that with port spoof. Port spoof has some logging capabilities built into it as well. All we need to do is make sure that those logs, wherever they reside, are getting thrown out into our SIM. Charges said, hey, you could also use logger, honeyport, tripped, for, and then IP address. Absolutely. Very, very cool stuff, right? So we have that capability. And I love the fact that everyone, when I start talking about logs, is either throwing out Ren and Stimpy, it's log, it's big, it's heavy, it's wood, or the new favorite GIF of the day is the log, like the logging truck thing that delimbs, and it's like throwing out. Oh, so good, so good. GIF game in this class is strong, Megan. The GIF skills in this class are strong. I'm very impressed with them as well. All right, so let's keep rolling on this. What does it look like when you run port spoof? Well, imagine that every single port that somebody tries to scan is open in and of itself. Now also imagine that every single one of those ports is not only open, but it has an actual service associated with it as well, right? So if we have those two things going on, what exactly does that do to the attacker? And this is what we're going to be doing in the next lab. We're only going to be doing it for 10 ports, the first 10 ports on a computer system. But I want you to kind of play a little bit of math and kind of abstract. If we did this for all 65,536 ports, how bad would it be? All right. All right, so here we got the lab for port spoof. Let's go over here to the lab instructions. There we go. Intraclass files, go to navigation. And we're going to go all the way to the bottom, and we're going to do port spoof right here. Now, once again, the idea of port spoof isn't enough to just simply block an attacker. We don't want the attacker to do that. We want to entangle that attacker as much as we possibly can on the system for as long as we possibly can. So you're going to be running port spoof. You're going to be running IP tables, pre-routing. This is going to reroute any and all traffic that comes into the system from ports 1 to 65,535. It's going to redirect it to port 4444. Then when they hit there, port spoof is going to be running for all of those ports, and it's going to be serving up that those ports are open. In its default setting, it just says the ports are open. In and of itself, it's enough to mess with an attacker. I'm going to talk about some vendor products that do that. Next, what we're going to do is spoof signatures. So we're going to give a signatures file back to Nmap, Nessus, and those types of tools for it to actually chew on, right? So we go netcat port 1 through 10. We're going to do a version identification scan. Now we actually have real service, well, they're not real service, but real service banners being thrown back at Nmap. And you're going to record how long it takes for that scan to run against your local system on the local network. All right. And then we're going to play with some math on that. All right. So this is the lab. We're going to be running port spoof. Let's set 20 minutes on the clock. That sounds good to me. And then I'll do the walkthrough, and then we'll take another break. All right, everyone, let's get rolling. I'll see you on the other side. All right, let's get going. So the goal of this lab is to kind of introduce you to port spoof, and really the thing I want you to focus on is the amount of time it takes to just scan 10 stupid ports. So we're going to become root, first thing out of the gate, become root. ADHD is, in fact, the password. And then we're going to run this wonderful little IP tables rule. And this particular rule, what it does is it's going to reroute any and all traffic that's destined anywhere between ports 1 to 65,535 to port 4444. So think of your computer as like a great big funnel that comes in. Now, you may have a situation where you have an actual port, let's say port 443. And what you would do is you do one rule that's 1 colon port 442. And then you would do another one that's 444 to 65,535. So what it would basically do is break this up into 2 rules where every other port other than the actual port that's being used on the web server would be redirected to port 4444 on the system where port spoof is going to be listening. Now I'm going to run port spoof in just straight up not interesting mode. We're not going to do anything crazy with it. No super awesomeness. It's just going to say that ports are open. And I'm going to get my IP address. So we do ifconfig. And we have 172.30.253. There we go. And I'm just going to do nmap. And we're going to do ports 1 to 10. And we're going to run this port scan against 172.30.253.75. And it's going to come back here in just a few seconds. And it's basically going to say that all 10 of the ports are open. Now, this ran really, really quick. And the reason why is because it's a standard SYN scan. It's just a straight up SYN scan, nothing special. See, if we go through and try to do something like add in, let's do SV to do a services scan against those ports, takes a hair longer, but when it comes back, it's going to tell us that everything is TCP wrapped. That basically means that the port is open, but when it tries to interrogate that port to identify what the service is, it's getting nothing back at all. And that's because that's the way we've configured port spoof at this point. It's not actually sending any data back to a SYN packet, nothing at all. It's just blank. So what is the value in doing this? Well, it turns out that there are some devices out there in Fortinet and Palo Alto where they have some capabilities of importing some cyber deception capabilities into the device itself. For example, some of them can run in such a way where it'll just do this and say all the ports are open, but it'll also do that for every single IP address on the other side of the device. So this is really great for creating a very small, simple port screen. So now what we're going to do is we are going to give it a signatures file. I'm going to see how this works. That is not what I wanted. I have to do type clipboard text. Keep forgetting that. So now we're restarting port spoof, but now we're going to rerun our nmap scan against the system. We're still doing a services scan, ports 1 to 10, but everything is different. Now, remember, we're only scanning 10 systems. 10 systems out of 60, or 10 ports out of 65,535 possible ports on that system. And right now, I'm kind of talking, honestly, I'm stalling for time at this point because it takes a long time for it to scan those 10 ports. And the reason why is it's interrogating those ports, trying to identify and match what are the services that are running on those ports. And still going. Now, imagine you're an attacker that's trying to port scan an environment and you just ran this, but you didn't run it against the 10 ports. You ran it against, let's say, 1,000 ports. And if we go to the bottom, it says that it took 41 seconds to scan 10 ports. So this is the part that I warned you about today. There's going to be math, unfortunately. If it took 41 seconds to scan 10 ports, how many seconds would it take to scan 65,535 ports? Put that in. And how does that translate into hours? And how does that translate into days? Now, I got into computer security and started using computers because I suck at math. I just know it's a long freaking time. And when we're looking at detection time plus reaction time must be less than the amount of time it takes to an attack, I can feel fairly comfortable that doing something like this is going to add probably days on the attacker's profile of trying to get a port scan of one system. Now, if we're trying to implement this in an environment, do you have to implement it on every system? Hell no. All you have to do is implement this on at least one system in each subnet. And that's enough to tar pit the scanning that an attacker will do. So if an attacker post-exploitation is trying to run this in an environment, you immediately tar pit their port scan. If they're trying to port scan the outside of your environment, you immediately tar pit their port scan. The worst thing about this for an attacker is there's no real good feedback mechanisms in Nmap telling you that something like this has happened. The only way that you can deal with this effectively is to disconnect the Ethernet adapter, shut it down, or disconnect the cable to get Nmap to flush its buffer to show you what ports are actually open. Otherwise, Nmap just sits there and scans. Same thing for Nessus as well. So this greatly increases the amount of time it takes for an attacker to scan your environment. So when you're setting this up as a honeyport or in your environment, you can do it on individual hosts. As we said, if anyone's trying to run any of these different scans, it allows us to detect it. All right, let's move in to a different honeypot, which is going to take us straight up into a lab and into the break as well. So the next tool we're going to talk about is Cowrie. Cowrie is different. It's not just spoofing a port, it actually is emulating a full SSH service on a system. It's completely built in Python, which I think is pretty cool. Now, there's a number of different honeypots that exist for emulating a wide variety of different services, but to be honest, Cowrie is one of the most full-featured ones that exist in there as well. Allows us to intercept and capture logins and activity by attackers, useful for capturing passwords that the attacker has as well. It's great for annoyance and for attribution. This is actually the output of a Cowrie server that we were running in an incident where we had an attack that was active, and we ran a Cowrie server, and these were all the commands that the attacker ran. Once again, going back to that idea of threat intelligence. Threat intelligence, most of the time when you buy it, is what attackers are running against other environments. With this, these are the actual commands that were running against my customer at this time. And this is beautiful, right? So if you're going through and we're running through this, you can see that they were changing permissions. They were making a directory called plugins. They were making a connection back to an IP address of 119.1.109.43 on port 443. All of these different things were available on there as well. Oh yeah, I can switch it to he. It could be a she. We try to bounce through and change it up every once in a while. So when you're looking at this, look at it from a threat intelligence perspective, okay? A threat intelligence perspective. I now know that there's a malicious IP address, 119.1.109.43. I now know I should be looking for any executable with the name of Linux time. I now know I should be looking for a directory called Etsy plugins, which is a little bit misspelt as well. So with all of this in mind, this becomes incredibly powerful, right? This becomes incredibly powerful from a threat intel perspective. And for this, in this environment, we actually went through and searched through the systems, and we were able to find 3 additional systems that were connecting back to that IP address. Once again, threat intel and what's working in your environment right now. Now, Cowrie, as I said, is phenomenal. And we're going to set you up on the lab, and then we'll come back to it here in just a little bit. Here we go. I do that. And I'm going to open up my Ubuntu command prompt. Let's go back to the Cowrie lab. And there it is. There you are. All right. So when we're looking at Cowrie, when you first start Cowrie, you're just going to start it up directly. You're going to check its status, and then you're going to try to log in. If you want to log into Cowrie, you can do this command. I'm going to put it in the Discord server really quick. There we go. And we're going to do root at localhost. If you try to do root at localhost and you give it a password of like 1234, it's going to allow you to log in and interact with Cowrie as well. You'll also be able to see the logs associated with it. I also have some challenges here at the bottom. It says, when you get a chance, look at the command configuration in the opt cowrie honey fs directory. The user accounts logging are in this file, and you can play around with it. What happens when you log in with one of the valid user IDs in the combos? What happens when you exit the session? Are there any solid IOCs that allows an attacker to identify that they are in a honeypot as well? And if you want to change those, like banners, key fingerprint identifiers, the IP addresses of the files, feel free to change those and then share that with fellow students on Discord, which is pretty cool. All right, so the next lab that we're going to set for this with the lab itself is going to be 30 minutes. Let's go ahead and do 35 minutes because there's some challenges at the end. The big thing is I gave you the command to actually log in, and I'm going to put that in resources here. So if people want to actually log into Cowrie as well, they can. Just remember, you got to give it a password of something like, 1, 2, 3, 4. There you go. I put it in resources. So let's go ahead and do 35 minutes on the clock, and I will see you on the other side, and we'll walk through this and show you some of the awesome things that we can do even further. All right. I also have a really cool pen test I'm working on right now. I'm going to share with you guys some of the results of that pen test on the other side. See you rolling. Bye. It's kind of like those videos you see online where people are like, my dog's a vegetarian. And they're on like the news show or something. And it's like, they give the dog a choice between broccoli and steak. And like the dog just keeps going to steak, right? All right. So let's go through this lab real quick and play around with it. And then I got some fun things to share with you with a hack that BHIS has done, which is great. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to CD into the opt cowrie directory. So I need to go back to my VM, click to re-enter. All right, there we go. So we're going to, nope, got to stop doing that. There we go. All right, so we're going to type in the clipboard text. There we go. Now I am going to start Cowrie. Pretty straightforward. Now notice I am not running this as root. If you actually try to run Cowrie as root, it freaks out a little bit. And it's like, that's a really bad idea. You shouldn't be running Cowrie as root. Now we want to check the status of Cowrie to make sure that it's running properly. Go ahead and paste that in. And it says it's currently running, which is great. Awesome. We can also check to make sure the twist-D libraries are running. That allows us to actually listen on the port and serve up a service. And it is running and listening on port 2222. So we're doing pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is a couple of different things. I'm going to CD into the opt cowrie directory in here, and I'm going to tail minus F the cowrie.log that is current right there. So it's going to show the current logs that exist. And then I'm going to authenticate to myself. So I'm going to go SSH. We're going to do port 2222, 127.0.0.1. And as soon as I try to authenticate, it gives me the key fingerprint. And then I put in the password. Password is, give it a second, try to log in with that password. And it comes back, and as you can see here, it intercepted my user ID, which was ADHD, and my password, which was... So we were able to see those authentication attempts come in to the Cowrie server, which is kind of fun. But let's say that I actually wanted to authenticate to the Cowrie server. Well, then you would feed in an actual user like root as example. And if we tried to log in, we'd have a password 1234, and we're logged in. Now, all the things that are wrong with Cowrie are pretty much represented on this slide or the screen. The SHA fingerprint is the exact same for every Cowrie instance. The prompt right here, root at server 4, is the exact same for every single Cowrie instance. The programs included with this Debian GNU Linux system are free software. The exact same distribution is the exact same. If I do uname minus A, gives you the exact same server version. If I do ifconfig, it is the exact same IP address. Every single one of these things can and should be modified before you actually run it in production. And the reason why you should modify all of these things before you run it in production is because tools like Nessus and Nmap and a number of other tools will properly identify this as a honeypot. Now, they'll be stuck on this system for a period of time doing all kinds of different things. And then after a while, they're going to get tired and they're just going to exit out of their system, and then they're going to get the connection server closed. Now, at this point, I want to share with you what I've discovered at BHIS. One of my testers rather discovered that I think is pretty fascinating. One of my testers at Black Hills Information Security was able to successfully break into Google. Yeah, absolutely. Can somebody in Discord give me an IP address in Google? Any IP address will work. What would be a good IP address for Google? Yeah, 8.8.8. Problem is Google's reusing passwords, right? They're reusing the exact same passwords again and again and again. I'm going to accept the key fingerprint, and I'm going to put in Google's password. There we go. And now I'm logged into one of Google's servers. So pretty scary stuff, right? Now, what is this particular password that they're using? Well, see, there's the trick. I didn't actually hack into Google. The thing is, I never left Cowrie. So whenever I was on the Cowrie server and I typed exit, it's programmed to say the connection to the server is closed, and then it gives you a secondary prompt that says root at localhost, and it still collects all of your commands. So as soon as I tried to SSH into another system, it's still in the matrix and it's still harvesting my user IDs and passwords. And if I go over here to my logs, scroll down to the bottom, you can see I tried to authenticate as root to Google's IP address for DNS, and then my password was not Google's password. So I never actually hacked into Google at all. It's once the attacker has entangled with the Cowrie SSH server, they're kind of stuck at that point, and it becomes this really cool tar pit. And we've actually captured additional credentials that the attackers have had on other systems, so we can, like we actually can hand that over to law enforcement, which is funny because a lot of times law enforcement doesn't even know what the hell to do with it at all. So very cool stuff. But one of the things you need to do is change some of the default settings for the Cowrie SSH backdoor that's out there as well. So when you're looking at this, you have to ask, is the attacker trying to log in with valid user IDs and passwords, or are they just spraying and praying? If they're trying to log in with Apache and root and Tor and all these accounts, I don't know how excited I am. But if we look at an attacker that's trying to log in with these user accounts, and these user accounts actually are directly related to real valid domain accounts, you are not dealing with an automated attacker. You're actually dealing with a targeted and determined attacker coming at your environment as well. Now, there's a whole host of other tools that do this for you. One of those tools is a tool called Artillery. Now, this is written by Dave Kennedy and the fine folks at TrustedSec. It actually stands up a number of different honeypot services on RPC SMB ports, 1433 MySQL, and then 5900 VNC. The only problem with this particular honeypot is it brings up the exact same ports, which by the way is configurable. So you can tune it however you want, but running in its default configuration actually is a pretty dead giveaway that somebody is running Artillery on their computer system. Also, it has the capability of generating email alerts. It has the capability of monitoring a file. Somebody had asked about that on day one. Can we monitor files and generate an alert whenever somebody tries to access the files? Turns out you absolutely can with a tool like Artillery. Now, if we want to take this web server idea, we can go further. We can revisit some of the concepts that we discussed, like Spider Trap, right? In Spider Trap, we had the ability of creating an infinitely recursive directory loop using Python. Well, one of my friends, Ben Jackson, wrote a tool called Web Labyrinth a long, long time ago. And I haven't seen Ben in a long time and I miss him horribly, but it was all written in PHP. So you could integrate this with the other PHP applications that your environment actually have. So you can set it up. Now, it has some really cool features. One of my favorite features is the Wheel of Chance. Imagine that you have a great, big, huge, round 100-sided dice, right? And PHP, you can do this where you have random 0 to 100. You can roll that, and if it comes up on 16, it says 404 not found. If it comes up on 23, it says 403 forbidden. If it comes up on 42, it says, payment required, which is kind of weird. Now, the reason why it actually does that is because a lot of the different servers that are out there, a lot of the different testing tools, if it's getting a response for absolutely everything, it kind of shuts down and stops crawling at that particular point. By incorporating things like the wheel of errors, it actually throws some randomness into it. That'll keep those crawlers entangled as much as you possibly can. Also has the capability of telling certain crawlers like Googlebot, MSNbot, that you can just stop crawling. And the reason why that's critical is a long time ago, somebody that basically worked with his team to create a infinitely recursive directory loop for a web server ensnared the Googlebot for about 14 hours. Don't know who that was. But we thought it was a good idea to actually start incorporating tools to basically tell legitimate bots that they need to go away. The other thing that Web Labyrinth incorporated that I thought was pretty cool is it incorporates the capability, instead of just feeding back a random directory listing, you can feed it a file and it will choose random words in those files to become directories. So it's not a predictable directory set. And also, some of these directories, when you attempt to access them, will be emails. It'll pop up and say, hey, this is actually an email. Do you want to send an email to this person as well? Now, we decided to push this a little bit. What if, just possibly, what if you went into your Web Labyrinth config, and instead of giving it Alice in Wonderland or some text file like that, you actually gave it a full signature fingerprint file for like Saracata? Or what if you went to OWASP and you pulled down the cross-site scripting evasion cheat sheet and you literally just started shoving cross-site scripting attacks down to the attacker? Well, the reason why you would do this and the reason why that would be a lot of fun is because your intrusion detection system will make it so you cannot ignore it. It lights up like an absolute Christmas tree. Why are we putting out PDFs to people? I don't know what's being sent. I don't know, Angel. I don't, but I don't know if they're a good person, bad person. I would not open those files. I'm just giving you guys some life advice. Just, if you guys want to, you can live on the edge. Yeah, that's my Aerosmith reference for this day. So Angel is not an angel. So you've been following what's been happening. I'm out of the loop. It seems like I absolutely am. There's a lot of trust here. There's a lot of trust here, Megan. I'm just going to say that there might be a little bit too much trust going on. Since we're sharing credit card numbers and PDF files and things of that nature as well. So yeah, just shove a whole bunch of snort rules down it, and it's just going to light up like a Christmas tree, and just freak things out. All right, so we have another lab coming up, application specific honeypots. Now we're going to fire up a honeypot that is meant to emulate an on-prem exchange server. Now, in the world of computer security, between a value of 1 to 10, 1 being like a good idea in computer security, like two-factor authentication, and 10 being something dumb, how dumb is it to run your own on-prem exchange server? Just out of curiosity. Yeah, just don't. Like it's just don't. A 12. Yeah, it's high up there. It's high up there. You just shouldn't do it, right? But there's a number of different application honeypots that are available to you. You can do SCADA emulation. We're going to talk a little bit about Conpot here in just a couple of seconds, but then we're going to fire up one that is full on Outlook Web Access honeypot. We'll show you what that looks like. So this one is the configuration for Conpot, where you can go through and you can change all of the different values for Conpot that are identified by Nessus and various vulnerability scanners. So it identifies it as a honeypot. So let me show you. If we actually go to Shodan, let me go to straight up Shodan, and I do a search for, let's just do SCADA. Shodan actually has built-in capabilities to identify honeypot systems. Let's give it a second here. And we'll see if any of these come out right here. So it says Cloud Honeypot. That's one. It's ICS, Honeypot, Honeypot, Honeypot. So it's built in to Shodan to be able to identify honeypots. So if you want to change your profile for your system, you absolutely can. You just have to go in and change some core values within the honeypot configuration to make it work. All right, so now let's go ahead and let's jump into a lab. We're going to work with a web honeypot. Go here, go all the way down to the bottom, and we're going to do web honeypot. Now, in this one, your goal is to actually fire up and run an Outlook Web Access web server, and you're going to run Z attack proxy against that web server and run a scan against it. And the reason why you're doing that is I'm going to show you all of the logs that it generates so you can see the attacker coming in. And seriously, it generates a lot of logs, which is actually going to be pretty important here in just a little bit. So let's go ahead and let's set the timer for 25 minutes. So we have 15 minutes for the lab and then another 10 minutes for the break. So let's do 25 and then we will resume, not 52. There we go. Dyslexia drives me knucking futs as well. So we're going to go ahead and set it for 25 minutes and we're going to roll around and we'll walk through the lab and I'll share with you all some news stories and we'll close out for the day. Let's get rolling. Yeah, I've just got to say, I love this class so much. Like, I, I, I don't think I've ever had a class like sharing links, sharing files, playing with reception things, throwing them at each other. Mm, it's just so good. So good. Somebody said, I'm sure John will teach us how to make malware out of Microsoft Office products. That would be a correct assessment, and we will be doing that. We will be doing that. We'll be talking about that tomorrow and how we can do that. Make this smaller. Close that. Sorry, I'm just trying to get caught up with you all. All right. We will be doing that. All right. Yeah, I don't know. So far, Angel's got my student of the class award. Angel's like, I only got 4 hits on my campaign. That's adorable. All right. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get this stuff ready to go. And let me open up another terminal. Let me minimize that. And open up a terminal so we can walk through this lab. And then I can talk about some news stories. We can talk about some laws a little bit, getting us prepped for tomorrow. So we're going to open up our Ubuntu system. There we go. And I'm going to go up to the top, start over so I can catch up with you. And we're going to CD into the opt-oa honeypot directory. Put that, God, I got to stop doing that. I got to stop doing that. There we go. Type clipboard text. That's the way you copy and paste. All right. And then we're going to start up the Python little web server, which I think is pretty adorable. A little cute little web app. So we got that and it should start up and it's running. It's not for production. Do not use this in production ever. Just shouldn't do it. Don't do that. That's not good idea. I'm going to get my, well, I guess I got it right here. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this whole URL right there. And we're going to go into Z attack proxy and we're just going to let Z attack proxy do its thing. I'm going to paste that. There we go. I don't need to put the 80. That's redundant. And we're just going to start the attack. And whenever we start this attack, we'll see the actual logs being generated on this particular system when the attacks are actually going through. Scroll down there. Connection failed to what? Okay, maybe I do need that, which would be very weird if that were in fact the case. I wonder if it got the wrong IP address. It's entirely possible it did. So let's go here. So we're going to go ahead, open up another terminal. I'm going to go ifconfig. Oh, yeah, that might be. Well, I don't think I have anything. Calories not listening on that port. So let's go ahead and let's just try to surf to it. There you go. You know what it could be, though? You know what it could be? Actually, I'm pretty sure I know what it is. Uh, Let me restart the system. Remember we created a firewall rule? Do you guys remember that? We created a firewall rule that rerouted all traffic coming to the system. Yeah. So we need to flush our firewall rules. So let me go ahead and do that. IP tables minus T NAT. So we're going to clear out the NAT and we're going to flush it and pre-routing. There we go. And let's see if that works better now. There it is. That was the problem. All right. So, all right. So now let's start our attack. Stay on target. Stay on target. And there we go. So there's the attack. Now, the cool thing about that is it's going to be generating just a crazy amount of logs on the other side. And this is one of those things that I think is kind of funny whenever we're working with companies and we do web app attacks and things like that. And doing web app pen testing, we have customers on a very regular basis that say, "Oh, geez, you broke into our website. Wow, there's nothing we could have done to stop that. Nothing we could have done at all." And it's like, no, 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 go look at your logs. Like, look at all the logs that we generated trying to break into your web server. Yep, nothing we could have done to stop this attack. I'm like, no, there's literally tens of thousands of logs being generated. Yep, a hack was inevitable. So it's just kind of ridiculous. So, a web honeypot or setting up different honey tokens, setting up these things to catch the attacker in a snare and have it spin around is just crazy effective. Wasting an attacker's time, because whenever you're looking at a lot of different organizations, there is a ton of web services that they're actually utilizing. So we're going to be releasing a new honeypot here in a little bit that will be like it'll automatically clone a website and load all of these different things up into it, which I think is fun. I think that's really, really cool. So that's the lab. All right, so now we're going to spend about 15 minutes and I'm going to talk about some news stories in cyber deception and how cyber deception was used in those attacks. These aren't in the slides, but they're basically some links that you all can look at. This is one of my favorites out there. So a long time ago, it was told to the Macron campaign in France back in 2017, yo, the Russians are coming after y'all. You might want to do something about it. So French the French Macron campaign staff was like, what do we do? The Russians are coming after us. And of course, the standard security wisdom was like, oh, you're going to get hacked. So what do we do if we get hacked? And they're like, it's going to suck. Okay, great. So if I don't want it to suck and I know that we're going to get hacked, what can we do? So what they did was actually ingenious. So what happened is Macron's campaign knew that they were going to be compromised at some point by the Russians. That whole anonymous suspect us type thing. So what they did is they seeded a whole bunch of false documents inside of their inboxes. So inside of Gmail, they went through and they seeded all kinds of fake PDFs with all kinds of fake policy statements, all kinds of stuff that was absolute complete garbage. Right here, look at this. Aware that these were phishing emails, the Macron team engaged a counter-offensive strategy. They gathered or generated a slew of false email accounts, fake email documents. Then they entered the login credentials for those fake accounts into false sign-in pages. Now, what does this do? What this did is as soon as it was breached, and basically the attackers went out and they dumped all their stuff out on a number of different websites. I can't remember where. God, Angel just posted a PDF, Macron.pdf. You know what? You win, Angel. I'm going to give you here. I'm going to open this file for you, Angel. All right. Congratulations, Angel. You just hacked the Strand. I just opened it. It's got a really cool clip art thing going. So timely, so well done, and also really, really fast. I'm giving you kudos. Well played. Well played. So all this stuff set up on WikiLeaks and a number of different sites. And immediately the Macron campaign came out and said, hey, that stuff that you shared a link on, that stuff has false data in it. And it was funny because WikiLeaks came out on their Twitter account and was like, we just posted this like an hour ago. How is it at all possible that you know that some of these documents are false? And very shortly after, the WikiLeaks Twitter account said, yeah, some of these documents are false. Now, let's say that you are an investigator, right? Let's say you're an investigative journalist and you're investigating things done wrong by the Macron campaign, totally not paid for by Le Pen at all. But let's say that you're going to investigate the Macron campaign and all of a sudden, like manna from heaven, every single one of their emails are dumped onto WikiLeaks. You, as a reporter, cannot ask any more than that. You can't. And then you find out that the Macron campaign seeded a whole bunch of fake documents in it. Can you, in good conscience, go forward and writing news articles about what you discover in that trove of emails if you know that the Macron campaign was intentionally putting false documents in that email trove? No, you can't. No, you really can't. No one's going to pick up and run with your news article. And then from a legal perspective, it goes through into fruits of a poisonous tree, right? I mean, you're not going to take anything from that. So it poisoned the well completely. So I like this as an idea. And one of the things I just think would be fun is you could be like, create a blog with fake math data and proofs. Right? So we could do this. We could say, ChatGPT, create a blog with fake mathematical data and proofs. And then it's going to come back. Let me close this out. Oops, I hit the wrong one. Let me rerun this one. This is what I want to do. I want to close that code. So we're going to create a fake blog with fake mathematical data and proofs. There we go. It's going to come back. Discovery of a new mathematical constant. Mathematics has always been the language of the universe, all these different functions. The quixotic content at the article delves into the mysteries of the origins of Q. It's all crap. So we have actually worked with some customers that have done something very similar where they have mathematical formulas for, like, let's say drugs. Let's say that they have mathematical formulas for like flight and from like engines and rockets and crap like that. We've gone through, created tons of fake documents, and then put it all over the environment. And the reason why they do this is because if they believe that they're being targeted by the Chinese, and the Chinese are after their intellectual property, give them some intellectual property. Because the hackers that are trying to break in, they honestly will not know if this is real or if this is not. And then they'll hand it over to their science team, and their science team is they might actually research it. They might try to do these different things. But you can see how this will absolutely mess with an attacker whenever you've put in this fake data. And also, if you're dealing with that and like straight up fake data, at that particular point, the attacker is probably not going to trust anything, any of the formulas that they actually discover as well. So that's kind of fun. Another story that I think is kind of good, how the US hacked ISIS. Basically, they set up a number of years ago a campaign, and they just started hacking the living snot out of ISIS and all of their different servers. This is back in 2019. Okay. Another great article. Let me post this one in over here for you. Another great one. And they didn't just break into ISIS. They also did a really heavy disinformation campaign. Okay. So let's just set up a hypothetical, a possibility, if you will, for the purposes of conversation. Let's say that you're able to break into some of the email accounts for an organization that's evil. Let's just do ISIS because I don't really have a lot of people ever try to defend ISIS. They're not like, well, ISIS. They're just kind of deeply at their core, they're misunderstood. You're either in ISIS or you're out of ISIS. And if you're out of ISIS, most of the time people think that they're pretty scummy, horrible people, right? And let's say that you get inside of ISIS's email, just a handful of email accounts, not a lot, just a handful, doesn't take many. And then you start sending messages to the other people in ISIS, and they're like, hey, Bill, you know what we should do? We should totally kill our commander because he's dumb. And I think he's a poo-poo head. Sent. You would not believe how much chaos you can create inside of an organization by taking over an email and then sending emails like that within the organization. Hypothetically, from what I've heard, you do that and you literally can sit back and watch that organization tear itself apart through that disinformation once you're inside of that particular communication thread, which is really, really super cool. So another great way of actually using disinformation to actually make attackers, here we go, to make attackers freak out. Here's another one. This is Operation Tovar. In Operation Tovar, this was kind of crazy. They actually were able to take over command and control server, Game Over Zeus servers. And the attackers in the middle of this, they attempted to send a copy of their databases to a safe location. But because they had used cyber deception, the law enforcement had used cyber deception, the attackers actually sent their database directly to law enforcement. So it becomes really, really easy to identify who's the ringleader behind the gang, and then actually shutting down all of the servers associated with it as well. So this is totally cyber deception associated with these attacks as well. Also, we can get into some military deception with some newer things. Let's get into Ukraine. This one's fun. Now, a lot of these are really getting into, uh-oh. What? Here we go. Let me pull it down. There it is. The Krishan ruse. Basically, Ukraine has been using a ton of cyber deception and just straight up deception in getting Russian soldiers to give up locations of where they're at. A lot of it is basically like, hey, I'm a beautiful girl and I want to meet a Russian soldier. Where are you at? And of course, the Russian soldiers are like, oh, we're over here. And it's like, okay, drones incoming. So there's some scary things there. What's another one? Oh, disinformation campaign. Another one. This is like the FBI did a full analysis of doppelganger campaign. And this is where Russia was actually creating, like they were creating a bunch of news sites that cloned existing news sites with fake news articles that were just barely believable. And they were just spearfishing that, not spearfishing, they were seeding this in social media and like just getting tons of people to then take that disinformation and repost that disinformation all over the place. So you remember we talked about all warfare is deception, right? We talked about Sun Tzu, we talked about these different things, and it truly is. And if we're looking at the asymmetry of warfare and as it exists today, kind of like all media now. Yeah, I wouldn't say all media, but you know what? I think that that's a good approach. Megan brings up a great point, almost as though she's been through this class multiple times. If you're looking at anything that is an actual like news story, you got to kind of go into it with a certain level of disdain, and you have to go through and try to validate it, right? And I know that this is kind of going through, getting into some things, and it pisses me off because it's like, well, now we're talking about politics. No, I mean, there's tons of disinformation that is being pushed on the United States for the explicit purpose of trying to get us to tear each other apart. You know what? It's working, right? We're going to get everybody to know. You're right, Brian. It's not just the United States, right? It's absolutely everything. And I think that the single greatest case for using disinformation is the fact that the adversaries that we are going up against are using that disinformation against us. And that is something that scares me. And one of the things I'm just hoping deep down, yeah, Joe Rogan. Yeah, that's right. That if I ever need, legit information, I go to Joe Rogan. Now, in Joe Rogan's defense, I just want to put this out there, which is a sentence I never thought I would string together, by the way. Joe Rogan, I think, has said point blank, I'm an idiot, I'm a comedian, I'm an entertainer. You shouldn't be using me for legit news. So I give him credit for that. I never thought me neither. I never thought I'd say that, right? But when we're looking at all of these different things, when you're going through and we're looking at should we use disinformation against the attackers are using it against us, and they're using it in a highly effective manner against us, right? And that whole idea of psyops, that whole idea of disinformation, the idea of seeding these PDFs with jokes and things like that, like we can normalize that, right? We can normalize that in our cyber defense, right? If you have intellectual property with, like formulas and patents, create fake ones, seed them, put honey tokens within those documents so that they beacon back. If you have credit cards in your processing, create honey account credit cards and set those up in your environment as well. And once again, I cannot stress this enough. Whenever an attacker finds cyber deception in play in an organization, it drastically changes their attack methodology. They tend to slow down a lot or just go away. Because we go back to that core rule that I talked about on day one. Don't get caught. Don't get caught. It's just like it's words to live by. Do not get caught. And if you find deception, you've got it there as well. So, all right. So now we're at Ask Me Anything. We'll go ahead and put some time on that. Is cyber deception different from counterintelligence? I would say counterintelligence, if you're looking at a Venn diagram, Velo, counterintelligence is a very large circle and cyber deception would be a small circle within counterintelligence. It would be a subset of counterintelligence itself. So good. Great question as well. All right. So what other questions do we have? Let's go ahead and keep those questions rolling. I noticed that my NyQuil or my DayQuil is wearing off. I can definitely feel that kind of rolling. I didn't do it. Wasn't me. Cyber threat intelligence sources. The big one that I use threat intelligence very, very different than the way a lot of other organizations use it. We use a tool called Flare. Boy, your product's good when Recorded Future, CrowdStrike, PenLink, and all these other people are after you and taking out ads. So this is a fantastic product. Very happy with Flare. We used to do all of our own like data breach information where we pull data breaches, info-log stealers, and things like that. And Flare is a fantastic product that we worked with. I'm not going to tell you that story, but we're happy for Flare. They got money, Series B, which I know I say that and I don't actually believe it. I'm like, oh God, it's the beginning of the end. Anytime anyone gets, any type of funding, it's just like, oh, Jesus. But no, this is what we use. What are ways that honeypots could be expanded in situations where you cannot use things like the firewall from the CTF story? So honeypots, okay, so I'll give you an example. Apple computers. I think I can talk about this because it's old enough. One of my former students a long time ago worked at Apple computers, and they set up honeyports on the outside of their environment. And if you scanned their environment, it would dynamically block your IP address, which was cool. But there's some magical things that happened when they did that. The first magical thing that happened was the number of like attacks actually hitting their web infrastructure, hitting their external services dropped by like 95% because the attackers would scan, get blocked, and there would be a very small subset of attackers that would continue to try to get through and try to attack the services that Apple was exposing. The other thing that Apple Computer found out is it was literally saving them hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in storage fees because they were storing these logs from their firewalls, IDS systems, and what was hitting the outside of their environment. And simply by putting in these honeyports and automatically shunning the script kiddies or skidiots or ankle biters or whatever you want to call them, the amount of attacks that it reduced was just a tremendous amount. And it saved them a lot of money on storage accounts for storing logs. By the way, for the record, Apple has a huge external footprint and they're attacked all the time. So Weems, hopefully that kind of answers your question. Josh, how does cyber deception play into false flag? The Chinese doing something, but to try to make it seem like Iran was doing it. Absolutely, it plays into it. In fact, if you look at the Vault breach from the CIA, Vault 7, if you go through the documents in the Vault 7 breach, you can actually pull them all down from WikiLeaks. There's actually some extensive documentation about how the standard concept of operation should be to make your malware look like it's coming from someone else. And this also gets into something that I fought for a long time when I was working at Department of Defense, is a lot of the focus at DoD was, and this kind of highlighted the difference between China and the United States for a long time. So whenever you're working with cyber offensive operations, the Department of Defense and JSOC, SOCOM, IC communities and things like that, they were spending a tremendous amount of money trying to get the absolute best backdoors, hacking tools, and 0 days that they could get their hands on. And they were willing just to spend a tremendous amount of money in trying to do that, right? So there was a lot of money, a lot of effort that went into creating the best of the best tooling. The problem with that, speaking of like Flare, let's go to Flare malware. Completely different thing. So that's Flare VM, threat intelligence. So there was a piece of malware out there called Flare, and I don't know. I think there's too many things called Flare now. And this particular, I think it was called Flare. I might be getting it wrong. It's a long time ago. It was really a super advanced piece of malware, and specifically would only execute on language packs that were systems that had the Arabic language pack. And being the fact that it was like super, super crazy advanced, and I think it had some certificates from Microsoft. Really, the only people in the world that could have created it was the United States. So one of the things that we were pushing on a long, long, long time ago was the US needed to effing stop using cutting edge 0 days for absolutely everything that they were doing, and instead starting to use some more commodity malware. If you need to use elite stuff, use elite stuff. If you don't need to, don't. Only be as elite as you absolutely have to be to obtain your objective. And the reason why that was important is if they could switch over to using Cobalt Strike, if they could switch over to using Metasploit, if they could switch over to using any type of open source command and control product out there, all of a sudden attribution is incredibly difficult. And this goes all the way back to Stuxnet. Stuxnet, really, I think it had 3 or 4 0 days, like keyboard layout vulnerability, link vulnerability, scheduled task abuse, and I can't remember what other ones it had, but it had like 3 separate 0 days built into the damn thing. And it was specifically targeting PLCs from Siemens that cost like hundreds of thousands of dollars to obtain. So when you're looking at who could have built this, it's pretty much the United States, Israel. That was it, right? So it created this thing where you now know exactly who is behind the creation of this malware. So when you're looking at what the Chinese do, they just throw wave after wave of expendable men at the situation. Like quantity has a quality all of its own. But what you're starting to see more and more nation states do is kind of a mix. They're using open source software. They're using Cobalt Strike. They're using Brute Ratel. They're using Nighthawk as much as they possibly can. Not Finfisher so much, our man Surge. But they're kind of using a lot of these commodity software packages and modifying them just slightly to get under the radar. Now, all of that changes dramatically whenever you're looking at Russia, solar winds, whenever you're looking at the Microsoft attack the Chinese did against Microsoft. There's the telco attacks. Like there's some really advanced stuff out there, but a tremendous amount of what they're doing is just straight up commodity level attacks out there as well. Um, let's see what else we got for questions. Is it worthwhile to send a honey document to a fisher? Yeah, I think it's fun. You got to be careful. I had a friend that was looking for a bridge home in Kansas City. This was a number of years ago. He was looking for a bridge home and went online somewhere and said that he was looking for a bridge home because he was selling his house, buying another one, looking for a specific area. And a group out of Africa basically reached out to him and said, "Hey, we've got a house. It's for sale. You can live there. It's a bridge house." And he was able to go see the house. It sure enough was for sale, everything. And the people in Africa have said, "Hey, but we're going to need money from you as a down payment. We're going to need the first and the last month's rent as a down payment." He noticed the headers on the email were coming from Africa, and he realized that he was getting scammed. And I think it was on Craigslist. So he sent a spear phishing email with malware inside of a Word document saying he needed to have a contract in place. Could you please sign and approve? And he was able to take over all of the systems in their operations, got pissed, and then deleted all of their systems. Do I recommend doing that? No. Professionally, as a matter of opinion, as a professional opinion, as your instructor, and as an InfoSec luminary, you should never do that, ever. However, human to human, that crap's fun. So my point is don't do it. But if you do, be sure to be careful and be sure to have a great time. So that's probably bad advice. Can you tell I'm getting jaded in my old age? Just kind of getting there. As Brian's gonna be like, you're not old. So all right. From your experience dealing with zero-click malware, how would you describe its technical complexity in terms of exploit development, ADB persistence mechanisms? So that's from Dead Grapes. This is really getting into NSO Group and Pegasus. So the NSO Group is an Israeli company that is truly just a self-licking ice cream cone. So what they do is they create all kinds of malware. And for the record, there are a lot of exploits out there that are zero click for Android and for iOS. Now, people that work at Google and work at Apple will be like, well, that's just not true. Well, honestly, whenever I say that there's a lot of organizations that have these, they're nation state level adversaries. The United States is keeping a number of these. The Israelis are keeping a number of these. So are the Russians and so are the Chinese. Now, the really important thing about this is they have the ability of deploying these in a zero click type manner, and they send it through malvertisements. And this is one of the things that pisses me off about mobile devices, right? It used to be that you could run ad block as an app and it would set up a proxy where everything would go through your device and get filtered and filter out all ads off your phone, not just in your browser, but all ads through all applications. And that became a very, very effective way of shutting down advertisements and also shutting down a lot of attacks that would come into your phone. Well, Google and Apple looked at that. They're like, well, we make money on ads. We can't have that. So they started shutting things down so those advertisements would flow, they would make money, life is good. All of this is garbage. All of this is crap. All of this is depressing, and it's getting into this dystopian stuff that we talk about every Monday on BHIS is talking about news, where you can witness the downfall of the human race real time with us. We can hang out. It's good. Now, the problem with all of that is it's kind of built into the ecosystem. Your phone is a built-in advertising machine to give you advertisements, right? And that angers me, right? And that's one of the reasons why we're writing a class on Android pen testing. We're going to do another one on iOS pen testing here in just a little bit. But they're kind of these closed ecosystems that are hard to get into. They have a very high barrier of entry to actually get into them, and we need to break down that barrier. And Corellium does a good job with that, and that is incoming here shortly as well. Oh, there we go. There we go. Oh, you mentioned the pen test. Real Benji, that was the Google joke I had. When you said you're mentioning a pen test that you're currently doing, that was the Google joke where I said, "Hey, I hacked into Google. Here's the password." And that was all the setup for me showing you that Cowrie was logging and it was like the matrix within the matrix as well. So that was the joke. Should I set up honeypots on my home networks? I recommend just setting it up on VPS. Set it up on DigitalOcean or something. It's the best way to go. Now, if you're going to set up Cowrie, I'd recommend that you set up Cowrie and you set it up in. Be sure to configure the header files, the signature files, and things like that as well. Any thoughts on how these cyber deception techniques can scale down to an individual research level? Yeah, absolutely. You absolutely can set this stuff up. As we were just talking about, you can set it up in a VPS at home, or sorry, at a VPS using DigitalOcean or Linode or something in that nature as well. Turning 32, but you feel 40. I actually am 47 and I feel 32. So that's kind of weird how that works. It depends on what I'm doing. Whenever I'm working in computer security, I feel ancient. I've been doing it now for over 25 years, and it's really just kind of it's terrifying how things aren't getting better. And I think that that's one of the reasons why I get so tired about it. So with that, we got to kill it a little bit early today. So I just want to say thank you so much, and I will see you back here tomorrow morning. Last day of class. Last day. All right, get ready. Hold on to your butts. We're going to get rolling. Take care, everybody.
All right, have a good night, John. All right, everyone. We will see you same time, same place tomorrow. Hopefully everybody can make it. Go ahead, Ryan. It's time to kill it with fire. Night, y'all.